both of you. Morgan, let's start with you. President Trump has made it very clear he does not want North Korea to have a nuclear weapon that could possibly hit the United States.
You're right. And so what we're looking at, what we saw at the UN yesterday, and what we saw in President Trump's phone call to the South Korean president last night are two significant new diplomatic measures that this administration is taking. First, we saw Nikki Haley propose oil sanctions on North Korea.
Right.
That would be an incredibly significant step. That would involve the Chinese. They probably don't want to do it. And it would probably almost dismantle their economy. It would hurt so much. The other thing that we saw last night is President Trump's the South Korean president, where they talked about allowing the South Koreans to produce more non-nuclear anti-ballistic missiles, which they've wanted to do for quite some time. So although the left likes to argue that Trump's rhetoric is out of control, I think that this administration is actually pursuing incredibly smart and strategic diplomatic measures to try to avoid war.
David, you know, if China really wanted to help here, all they would have to do is what the administration wants them to, and that is to cut off the fuel to North Korea, because North Korea winds up with 80% of their stuff from China. So if they don't want a shooting war, let's do something about a trade war.
Well, you're correct. China is a linchpin to finding a diplomatic solution because it has a lot of influence in North Korea, more influence than any other country. North Korea's economy depends on China. China says the right things, but so far it hasn't done enough to alleviate this crisis. So if the U.S. were to have a policy to put more pressure on China, that's appropriate. I don't think we should start a trade war, but we do need to pressure China. And we also need to draw even closer to our allies like Japan and South Korea. It's a little bit troubling that President Trump is threatening a trade war with South Korea just as this crisis has arisen, when we need to be as close as possible to them so that we have a coordinated military and diplomatic response to this crisis.
Morgan, President Trump threatened to cut off all trade with anybody who trades with North Korea. Of course, the inference there is that China better pay attention, because we do $40 billion worth of trade with China every month. So if China wants our money, come on, help out.
Listen, we've spent the past 3 administrations running away from the Chinese, running away from the North Korean issue, being incredibly worried. No one has pressured China to the extent that they need to be pressured on this issue. So if the Chinese don't want a military war and they don't want an economic war, they're going to have to come to the table with us, because the current situation is unpalatable. So yes, any sort of fuel or oil sanctions on North Korea could cause their economy to really suffer. But the Chinese need to be pressured. I think the administration is smart to pressure them. And it's not about a trade war. It's about saying there has to be some sort of negotiated solution that we could all come to. And it's about time that someone pressured the Chinese and the way they should be. No one's done it for 3 or 4 decades.
David, I think you and Morgan are on the same side regarding China, but I'm going to give you the final word.
You know, one of the biggest problems here is there's a limit to how much sanctions can work. They work in lots of countries, like Iran, for instance. But in North Korea, which is such an authoritarian police state, where the leader of North Korea is not accountable in any way to his people, the people suffer under sanctions, but they don't impact the North Korean leader. So we have to find a way to coerce the North Korean leader to curb his erratic behavior. That's really the key. It's not just diplomatic. It's making sure the military option is on the table and finding other ways to push him to do the right thing.
All right, let's see what happens next. Let's see what our president does. All right, David and Morgan, we thank you very much for joining.